is laying down flat on the ground.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm gonna start with my little T in the rectangle. And I think we had, it was straight. And then did it curve all the way till it hit the top? Or was there, see how I'm like straightening it out again?
Yeah, so the,
This
yeah,
curve,
that's right, that's right.
it curved the whole time?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we had just straight. And then it
And
goes
then it
out,
curves. Yeah,
curved
down
down.
at the bottom.
So so the kind of salient points are, there's this corner here, there's a spot where the curves end. There's the bottom of this bit, there's where this ends, and there's the top. And then going the other direction, there's, you know, the width of this, and wow, that's really hard to see, sorry. There's the width of that, there's the distance to here, there's this width. This distance is gonna be uniform, and wherever this goes, you know, relatively. So now let's put the points, and I may put the points kind of slightly off the page, but I think still close enough that you'll be able to imagine them. So we'll have our horizon line. And can I do this just like full speed and then recording it, so you guys can go back and look at the recording, but you'll have seen it kind of start to finish. So instead of starting with this upright box and starting with this taller thing, we're actually starting with this bit. So we're really starting with a box that's gonna look, you know, like a book laying on its side, right? Or a brick. So I'm gonna work with the height like this. Draw those lines back to the vanishing point. The T in yours was turned. Okay, so you were looking at it like the top of it was here?
I'm realizing what my mistake was, and my mistake was that I drew the box like I would draw the box instead of moving the box.
Okay,
And I realized that looking at other people's drawings that
okay,
I didn't respect the box.
right, and the type of T that we're drawing, I think the way I'm gonna draw it here, you know, it's long ways this way. So if we were just doing a very simple T, what we would have is this box. And then this box.
Yeah, good.
So I'm doing a vertical line here. And another vertical line here, just to plot that longer form. I guess I'm choosing this angle because I think it's gonna show the most, like it's gonna be the most complex view. Back with my box, didn't quite line up, but I'm just going with it. So now I need to put the T on the top of the box. And so that's where I'm gonna want that X, at least one. and maybe a second, especially up here. I just feel the complexity of that. You know? I don't know. I think probably at the bottom too. That would help me. And it's not so important that this is a perfect drawing. It's just that you kind of let it be a guide, yeah. So, so I'll do the same kind of divisions on here. And I could do it, you know, like I mentioned to you guys, doing the bottom of it first or the back of it first. So if it's easier to see the bottom, like in this one, I think it kind of is, maybe I'll do it on the bottom. This is all the really tedious stuff, but I think it's what gives you a strong representation of it at the end. Okay, so now I've got that same kind of diamond grid shape, and I'm looking at now just sketching out that letter. So where does that first little bit of the letter fall, that curve of the T at the top? It's below this X, you know, just a little bit below it, probably not halfway. It's a little higher than halfway. So that's this distance that I'm looking at. So I'm going to go higher than halfway, which feels like that. And then I'm going to use my ruler to sketch. And how wide was it? It doesn't come out as far as the X either, right? It's, again, that feels like about halfway too. So I'll come halfway. If the X ends right here, I'll go about there. Did it actually touch the diagonal? It did. So let's do that. Let's just touch the diagonal wherever we run into that diagonal.
That inside point does touch the diagonal.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's a good mark to land on the other side too. Yeah, that'll keep us nice and honest. So I like hitting it on a diagonal. So now I've got those two marks for where it's going to end. Is it straight at all when it goes up, or does it is it straight at all?
No,
Okay, it's all curved. Okay, so then we can't really do much more with that until we find these inside points of the top. So those are above the X the way the other ones were below it. So we'll go above the X. And then in terms of its location, it also seems like it hits that that diagonal. So I feel great about that. I think I'll go down maybe a little bit lower. And I'll make a mark for that on both of those diagonals. And at this point, you know, I could plot a whole bunch of little dots that would probably start to confuse me, or I could just try to sketch in this curve. So I have that landmark and sort of the memory of what it is. I think because these curves can be so tricky, it's not a bad idea to just take note of where they cross over this other diagonal. So they cross over, you know, past the X a little bit. So I'm doing a curve like this on this side, but look how much longer that curve is on that side. That's just your difference in perspective. And these, you know, these do line up in perspective. These are also the points where the straight kind of trunk of that letter starts. So I'll go from those 2 points straight down. Then I've got to deal with the bottom of the T, which is, you know, between that center X and the bottom, and probably a little lower. So maybe right about here. is the height I want for that foot of the T. So I'm gonna draw a line to the vanishing point. So now what I've got is basically the T like this, but with no curve attaching the two together. So how high was that curve? It felt like it was just under the X.
Yes, it was like, the curve was right in the middle.
Oh, right
that
here?
diagonal.
Okay, okay. So, which feels high, but that's fine. And then the final thing we need to know is, where does this end? You know, how wide is this, the bottom of this gonna be? And I wanna say it's not halfway, but it's gotta be further out than the trunk of the T, right? It's gotta come out further. So maybe it is, maybe it goes right to the bottom of that X. So let's do that. So we follow that X down. Let's have that be the bottom of the T. That'll be consistent on both sides. Okay, so still working flat. I need a curve that goes from here to here. I get this one right. Brighter, sorry. Yeah, I want to go from here, from here to here, and from here to here. Those are the two marks we indicated as getting us from the curve to the straight. So I'm going to sketch that in. And then here's the other. So it's almost straight, you know, where I'm touching that, I'm not trying to start the curve, but I'm trying to just ease into it so that it feels consistent. I guess the downside of drawing these, the bottom up, is that maybe you're drawing more stuff you didn't have to draw. I don't think that's that big of a deal. We've got the letter done though. This is, the letter is completely drawn out at this point. So I might, I don't think you can really ever eliminate the guidelines, but I think it wouldn't hurt to lighten some of them up. You can always still see a ghost of them unless you're really committed to getting rid of them. And I never am. I like seeing the process of a drawing, so I'm all about the leftover lines. I just, only at the point where I get the feeling they're gonna start to confuse me, that's when I erase them. I don't ever just erase them for, you know, good measure, because I think it needs to be done. So we've got, you know, if we're projecting this letter up, we've got a lot of points that just need to go straight up in a perfect vertical. And I should really probably be using a triangle for this so I don't screw it up. So I'm just gonna land on either the bottom of the piece of paper or on the horizon line, one or the other, to just ensure that I'm getting verticals. And I'm gonna do the straight. Oh, thank you. I'm glad somebody in here is prepared. So the first corner of the T right here, can we see that? No, we cannot. How's it going down there?
We're good. I'm having them cut the bells right now.
Thank you so much for doing that. So this corner, this vertical, and I'm always going from the bottom of the box to the top of the box. This corner, another vertical. But how do I know where the top of the box goes for that one? Where do I stop? Any thoughts? this line, right? So if I go up to this point, that's the bottom of the T, that's it. That's gonna make our finished back edge of that T. Let's do it again on the front. So this is the front left bottom corner. Dominic, what letters do you see yourself doing? Have you thought about that? Try the what?
I try to tackle it out again, just to
Yeah.
nail that.
Yeah.
Once more. Just-
So this time I'm gonna draw that line back first, so when we run into it, we know when to stop. So I'm gonna go off of this corner. Did I not? Did I not draw that out as far as I told you guys I was gonna? That one goes to the X. All right, I didn't go far enough here. Suzanne, why didn't you tell me? Sorry.
I was.
That was your responsibility. Okay, it went out a little further than that, so I'm gonna ignore. I don't think I like that.
On your son of the demo, could you help?
Of course. Yeah, what are you working on?
Well, I'm gonna do this E in this weird perspective, but I more question the B.
Oh, yeah.
I just want.
Sure. Going straight up from that T. So now we have these 2 points across from each other. And they line up perfectly because we did what we were supposed to do and matched them to the bottom. The next thing we're doing is maybe projecting up here. I like going with all the outside parts of the letter first, you know, having all those landmarks on the edge of the box. The other vertical that's gonna cover up that nice curve I did. So now we're drawing this bottom plane of the T on that Sarah. Remember, we don't know how high that goes until we draw our line across. We know we have that same bottom side of the T on the other side. I also think drawing from the bottom up just forces you to draw everything, which I kind of like, because I think it keeps you a little bit more honest about, right, just tracing everything, you know, and then figuring out what the parts are that you need later. Just don't like where that line ended, because I know it has to go all the way to the end of this box. Then we've got the inside corner. So these are those 2 bottom planes of the T. Are we seeing that? Then maybe we could work on this, where those curves are gonna go. So we can take those points we already found on the bottom with the T square. Go straight up. Don't know where we're gonna stop, so I'm just gonna draw it all the way, you know, past the box. And then we'll figure out what that point is by doing that trick we've talked about, where you find the point you want, the original point. You know, on one side, you travel out toward the vanishing point, up the box vertically. When you hit the top of the box, you want the corner and you travel back down. And right there is telling us where that inside corner of the T is going to be. And then I can go out from the vanishing point, because I know the heights are the same, to find that other point. So now what we have again is, you know, this point needing to connect to this point with a curve, this point needing to connect to this point with a curve. And that makes two very different curves. You know, this is so wide, while this one is so tight. And this is something where I kind of like to lay the real letter down and look at it. I think it would give me a lot of insight on, you know, if that curve is correct or not. Now, if I drop this line down and these two curves don't line up, I may need to tweak one of the curves a little bit more. You know, they shouldn't be identical, but they also shouldn't be so different that they're not, you know, in line vertically with each other. So then we have these two inside corners, which are the same as these two corners, these inside corners, which are the width of the trunk. So we can go through that point down, and I'm going to make this kind of dark because I know it's a pretty key part of the letter. And same thing over here. And head down from that point. So now I've got that trunk of the letter. I've got the top, which is here. Are you seeing that? And the side here. Now, some of these lines that felt important to draw dark earlier, you know, they're starting to dominate the drawing now. So this, the bottom part of my T, you know, the inside, underside, kind of at the point of wanting to lighten some of those lines up. Because, you know, again, they're sort of starting to take over a little bit. So if I know the trunk of the T is going in front of this, I might just try to lift some of those lines out a little bit. I know also that this line down here, you know, that's actually a very important line because that's showing a lot of the weight and the anchoring of the letter to the ground. So I don't think it's necessary to, you know, do line variation right away or even do it mid-drawing, but I certainly think it's helpful. Okay, so then the last thing we have to do is to connect the top of the letter the way we did at the bottom, you know, to connect that curve. And I don't know if we've marked where the curve happens yet, or where the curve ends. Did we say it was right at the X? We did. I think we said right there in line with the X was the last moment where that.
Oh, yeah, that's where it is.
Yeah, so I could do two things. I could redraw that whole X grid on the top of the letter, you know, on the top of that box, or I could just project this straight up and do the little trick I've been doing where I kind of head out, like I could head out this way. Go up to the top of the box. This is why I never erase the box. Up to the top of the box, and then go back to the vanishing point. And where I run into that point, that's the point on my, oh, well, I have to keep going, right? That's the center point. I have to keep following that line till I hit the trunk. So I'll keep following that line back to the vanishing point. And where I run into the trunk of the letter, on the first part I touch it here, and the last moment I touch it over here. Those are the points where those curves are going to terminate. So I'm sketching the curve right here. It's funny, so much work to do this little sliver of a curve. And then here, same thing, curving till I go out to this point. and trying to let it be straight for just a minute on the bottom of that before I start that curve. So now if I beat these lines up a little bit, hopefully this letter starts to really take shape. You know, there's two ways to show this form, right? You get done with this letter, and even if it's accurate with all these crazy lines, it doesn't really feel like there's much there. So to really bring out the way the letter, you know, is going to look to other people, to make it look more successful, and to show all that space accurately that you worked so hard to understand and create. Line variation can be a really big part of that. And line variation is really size diminution, right? It's the same thing will appear larger when it's closer to you and smaller when it's farther away. So I'll want to use thinner lines, or maybe even almost disappearing lines, you know, as I get to the back of the letter. But at the front of the letter, I want my heaviest, boldest lines to really explain that space. So I'm even kind of shifting I don't know if you can tell, but I'm actually shifting the ruler around so I can do kind of multiple thicker lines. Also, you can do thicker lines on the ground than you would do at the top of the letter, because it's holding, you know, all that extra weight. If as you look at it, you see things that are still, you know, feel like they're taking away from the image. So I think this, I don't hate this curve, but I think it's almost a little distracting for the picture. I'll get rid of that. But I sure do think shading could bring this into a whole other, you know, realm of visual interest. So that's where, you know, I might enjoy taking the light and playing with how a shadow would play on this thing, and maybe working to represent some of that, to just anchor it more to the ground, and create more space. So then, what are your thoughts on that, or anyone?
Like I said, I think I needed to draw a different box, and that would have really started me off in the right direction. I think the issue was that I drew the same box for every perspective. It's
Yeah.
not the right thing to do.
Okay, yeah, great. So there was a lot of tedious technical stuff that we sifted through, but the first big
Yeah.
choice of just making this box not stand up,
Right.
but making it, drawing it up here, you know, not having a box that's standing up, but having a box that's laying down was kind of the game
That
changer
kind of
for you.
sets the path of
Yeah.
where you're gonna go.
There's a little bit of a mental hang up to, you know, when you're laying the letter down, because you're going in perspective in both directions when you have straight lines. But other than that, I don't think it varies terribly.
I think it's the curves that probably, like, most of them, they're just usually the worst, because they're just very different.
Yeah, and I
It's
think
like a circle.
I agree. And I think the more, I think the less curves you've done, the more points you should be plotting for those curves. So, I mean, that curve, it was so small, but I would think as a student who had not plotted or who had not drawn these curves before, I would probably be up there trying to find, you know, this point, and maybe 1 or 2 points in between to tell me, you know, what I need to do. And that drawing physically was so small, it would have been hard to do that, but I think doing it bigger would be, you know, beneficial for that reason too, that you'd see some of those more subtle changes. Rosa, I wanted to look at yours before.